Super Mike Maker is honestly one of my favorite games to talk about. Ever since its leaderboard release 8 months ago, it's been filled with 2 categories with a rich record history. It was literally my first world record history video subject all the way back on the 17th of March, when I both was using Cupwing and posted it originally on Vimeo. Now, I want to finally re-talk about this amazing game's record history. Specifically, we're going back to AOL, personally my favorite category. Let's take a journey back to Super Mike Maker's most documented speedrun history. This is the history of Super Mike Maker World Records. First, what have we talked about after March 17th? What have we missed? Well, obviously a lot. There's been a new record holder with a couple of new runs, and even a new, first speedrun, ever. Well too, the first one I won't count. Now, let's start with our quote-unquote first run, but I can't just not credit the actual first record holder, who had the record 2 years ago. Bluebatstar started our journey with a time of 3 minutes and 28 seconds. But, on the day of February 28, 2023, TNI, or the Nauruan Islander, posted the first official speedrun of just AOL, clocking in at 2 minutes and 58 seconds. First, we have Fire Flower Fields, a stage where TNI used, well, a fire flower to clear out enemies easily without issue. There's then this pathway, up or down. He chose up, a pathway with 3 pillars with a Goomba blocking the Pilar's exits. Next up is Spiky Sewer, a stage in which TNI had to avoid a bunch of dangerous spikes, but at the same time he was underwater. He did bleed a bit of time from collecting checkpoints and getting hit from saws. Next up, we've got Fiery Factory. It's a very tough stage requiring precise jumps and movement. He also had to wait for saws to move so that he wouldn't take damage, which lost him some more time. Finally, there was 1-to-1 Remake, a stage based off of the original Mario Bros. 1-to-1 stage, once again using the Fire Flower to clear enemies. After reaching the flag, he had completed the second run of Super Mike Maker, at 2:58. Now obviously, it wasn't the greatest. It had great movement, however it didn't have any of the known strategies of modern Super Mike Maker speedrunning. You could also just skip picking up fire flowers, which can save around 1.5 seconds. Overall, it was actually pretty good, however it still had some room for improvement. Funnily enough though, the run only lasted a day until one of our stars of this video finally appeared. And that is, the legend of Super Mike Maker, NIS. So, the first day of March came, and NIS got on his run. NIS would try to clean up most of the time losses in TNI's 2:58 in his run, while also trying to be careful. He still used the Fire Flower to clear enemies, and used the top path, where he got hit losing him around 2 seconds. Spiky Sewer is where the time saves actually started. He still got hit a few times during the stage, but didn't go for checkpoints, which as a result saved time, specifically around 1.5 seconds. Fire Factory was precise, including a good saw cycle and good jumping game. There was still a tiny bit of improvement due to once again, getting hit a few times. Finally, 1-1 Remake was a bit similar to TNI's 1-1, although NIS did accidentally slow down near this trampoline, losing another second as a result. The rest of the run was similar to TNI, and as a result, NIS beat TNI's 2:58 by 4 seconds, a 2:54. But still, there was time losses in the run, which equals 2, there's time to save here and there. So, NIS would continue to do runs, grinding for a better and more precise run. Unless if there wasn't someone to take his record. It was only a record by a second, however this guy is another legend of Mike Maker. His name is Greedy. Greedy's first run was interesting at best. You could even say his run was actually inferior to NIS's run in terms of execution. Starting off with Fields, Greedy's execution on this stage was better than NIS's, as Greedy didn't get hit and was able to be slightly more precise. After that, this stage is where the word inferior comes in. The first few seconds went well, but after that, he got hit. Then, he tried to nab a checkpoint. Then again, he missed a trampoline jump, and for some odd reason, tried to jump back on land with this useless super trampoline. Adding up most of the time losses, Greedy lost an abysmal 4 seconds in this stage alone. That's not good. However, Greedy still pushed forward, which was great to see. Factory came up, and almost immediately at the start, he did this. Was not a good idea. He was bleeding time all over, and with that weight alone, the time loss adding up nearly made his run doomed for 3rd place. But he still pushed forward. The rest of the level had one last mistake, before it turned into similar gameplay to the other players' runs. Maybe, just maybe, he could save time in 1-1 Remake? Well, obviously, he had a massive deficit of 6.1 seconds, which if not handled correctly can kill his whole run. But still, he marched on. Remake started by hitting both of the missed trampoline jumps in NIS's run. Basically, you have to precisely jump off of these platforms to barely hit the edges of the first 2 trampolines in the trampoline section, with the third and final being impossible at the time to hit. To capitalize on more of the time losses in NIS's run, Greedy also was able to jump over these trampolines instead of falling into the pit, saving him good time. And just barely, Greedy had saved enough time to completely remove the deficit, and get a time of 2:53. There was a massive room for improvement, and Greedy knew it. He had to get a good run. The final time was 2:45. He demolished his old time by 7 seconds. But the question is, how did he do it? Starting from Fields, things already were different. Instead of taking the top path, Greedy took the bottom path, which is considered superior to the top path due to its easier navigation and overall it being faster. As a result of taking the bottom path, he saved a second. For Sewers, he entirely overhauled his last performance. Not really, he just saved a lot of time in the stage. It was still nearly the same as his last Sewers, with a bunch of mistakes and slowdowns which were not good. He still saved 2.1 seconds, but nevertheless there was still room for improvement. Factory thankfully wasn't as bad. Greedy winged it with the final lava bubble, didn't have much mistakes and saved 5.8 seconds. He was on a roll. But before we go on to Remake, he introduced a new strategy in Factory. By damage boosting off this saw, then jumping on the platforms that the saws are on top of, you can rule out having to jump on the trampolines, saving around 2 to 3 seconds. And now, we can go straight to Remake. He was able to land 2 trampoline jumps, even on the 3rd one. Sadly though, he got hit a few and lost himself around 2 seconds, but fortunately, he was able to pull it together. And that is how he got a time of 2:45. The run was well polished. Despite Greedy's mistakes in Sewer and Remake, most of the run was well done and allowed for this very large record. Once again though, this record would stand for a day, when NIS came back and decided to reclaim his record. The first thing NIS decided to do in this run, was to completely wing it and not use the Fire Flower in Fields. Now, he would be hit more, but the time loss would be lower than the time loss of not nabbing a Fire Flower. So essentially he loses more time with the Fire Flower just by picking it up. NIS's Sewer game was more polished than Greedy, so as a result, got a decently okay Sewer, with just a few mistakes. In Factory, instead of waiting for this saw to go past, he just damage boosted and jumped past the saw with iframes, saving around 3 seconds. Once again, he nailed Factory. Finally, Remake was up. He got the second trampoline jump, but missed the third in the trampoline section, so he lost a second. After that though, he cleaned up Greedy's mistakes, such as him getting hit. As a result, he got a 241, a new record by a good 4 seconds. Later on that day, he got another record, a 240. NIS was aiming for a sub 240, which he considered was quote, hard. Now, there weren't any new runners as of now, but let's address something. Why am I even talking about a new runner, when this game is very new and could take several weeks for another? Well, if you guessed a new runner was coming in, you are indeed correct. Introducing another legend of Mike Maker, Induville. A surprise attack came from Induville, he got a record of 238. This run was surprisingly great from a new runner. Fields started off with actually amazing movement and barely had any mistakes. NIS's and Greedy's sewer game were completely blown out of the water with Induville's. The stage was incredibly clean with barely any mistakes, so clean in fact that the sewer probably wouldn't be so dirty. In factory, he did this. A very great times avenue instead of jumping higher. He also incorporated another strategy in which you can hit the corner of this saw and then use iframes, not having to use the second saw, saving around half a second off the original iframe strategy. And finally, remake. Induville finally incorporated no fire flower in this stage, making this the first ever run without using a flower. He was jumping over and killing enemies easily, without having to take damage nor having to use the fire flower. He added in a new strategy where you can jump on this exclamation mark block, and it'll make you fall slightly faster, and you can jump on this trampoline, jumping over another block and skipping having to get hit by this Goomba. But NIS wasn't taking a hit like that lightly. He responded a few hours later with a new record, a 237. This was an unexpectedly active day for Mike Maker. We are not even done yet, as we covered only 4 of the records on March 5th. Our 5th record would be held by a person named IDSAP, with a time of 236. It was essentially a very similar run to Induville's, except he changed the order of the levels. Instead of Fields first, Sewer second, Factory third, and Remake last as the usual pattern, he did Remake first, Sewer second, Fields third and Factory last. It was an interesting change, but truth be told, it did not change anything for the run's time. Now, during this time, Mike Maker was pretty optimized. There wasn't much known strategies that could save tiny chunks, and there was absolutely no known strategy for huge times abs. Sub 230 was seemed undoable, so as a result, NIS started up a forum about the possibility of no more time saves. Most people poured in, with Induville suggesting several time saves to help take the record lower. The time saves from Induville though, were decent and could allow up to half a second of time save, but no new big strategies. But then, a runner I've talked about almost for a bajillion times appeared. The man himself, TYS. He'd find something revolutionary, something that would allow not only for a big chunk of time to be saved, but also allowed for the sub 230. Introducing, fast menuing. Essentially, after the end of a stage, you have to go through this long 12-second long stat screen that isn't useful in any way, shape or form for the run. Could there be any way to skip this cutscene and save big time? Well, by pressing the green flag, you can indeed skip the cutscene. You do lose around 3 seconds from the intro, but you can save up to 9 seconds with this one trick. The 5th was facing a bit of dormancy during that hour, so TYS just said, why not try and just set several records with this trick? So, throughout the hour, and throughout the rest of the day, TYS would grind the record and would destroy it, in the process. 3 record-breaking runs. They had their fair share of mistakes, but they showed that TYS tried his best to perfect his runs. Ultimately, the run would stop runs for the rest of the day. March 5th was a very, very active day. But after all, there was still people looking for the record. It could take a day until somebody took the record. And it just so happened, on the 6th, someone new would take the world record. This guy's name was simply Crystal, and he would get on a run on the 6th of March. It included new strategies such as sliding on this slope, the duck kill, and a faster fast menuing strategy by clicking the green flag twice, which the 2 green flag clicks saving around 2 seconds. Sewers as of now was incredibly optimized, players started to get the hang of things and had barely any mistakes. The same thing happened with Factory, the stage was flawless, which was great. Remake was the least great part, but it was still actually good. However, he could have done the trampoline skip and not have to jump on this Goomba and bump into a wall. Overall, a great run, and it was near flawless, with some mistakes sprinkled in. However, one thing that stands out is the description. I think this guy was way off his calculations. I don't think you could take off 8 seconds off the record with little known time saves, and to be genuine, I think this guy was just trying to flex. Anyways though, a day later and Induville came back with a 2:15. This run was once again, another flawless run with Induville. Fields got the slope slide and the crouch hit, on top of not getting hit more than once. Sewers was improvable but still was mostly flawless and was executed commendably. Factory was literally fully flawless, no mistakes at all and perfect execution. And finally in Remake, Induville improved Crystal's Remake by hitting both of the tricks he missed, and using a new strategy where you use the Goombas as trampolines. So now, there weren't any new time saves. People guessed this is where it would end. Unless, if it wasn't for 10 coins. Kato Gaming, a kid whom would use a new faster variant of fast menuing. Say welcome to, extra tabs. Instead of navigating the menu screen to go to the official level section, you can just set up 4 tabs, one for Fields, one for Sewer, one for Factory and one for Remake. Each time you use an extra tab, it saves around 4 to 5 seconds. This allowed for one thing. Sub 210 was nearby. As a result of this very attractive achievement, several old runners came back. Specifically, Greedy and NIS were back in town. And on the 14th of March, Greedy would be the one to strike first. Unlike Induville, Greedy didn't really go for the more tougher strategies such as not getting hit or the crouch hit. Thankfully, his sewer game was now transformed. He was flying through the stage like if it was a piece of cake. But he did try going for a checkpoint cause he was low on health. And similar to the others, Factory was great and had little mistakes. However, Remake is when the straw broke the camel's back. His Remake was good, but if it wasn't for several small mistakes. It was crushing. He was on pace, but Remake just wasn't having it. It was very, very heartbreaking for Greedy, and he would stray away from Mike Maker again. NIS did it. Sub 210 was here. The run itself wasn't perfectly flawless, but finally, Sub 210 was achieved. 2 days later after this run and I would have posted my first video about this game. Such a great day. But now, this point after NIS is outdated in that video, there's new records to explore. Let's continue on. So, that video is outdated and we have new records to explore. NIS's record would be a long-lasting record, specifically, it spent 5 days uncontested. But, on the 20th of March, TYS would come back to nab the record. Similar to Greedy and NIS's run, in Fields, he didn't go for the more difficult and much more harder to execute strategies. Sewers was great, he didn't go for the checkpoint, and TYS didn't get hit as much in the others' runs. Once again, Factory was precise and included no flaws. Factory was essentially now perfect in nearly every record you'd see. And finally, TYS would clean up some of NIS's mistakes in Remake, adding up to a time of 2:05. Another new barrier was getting close, but this one looked way more harder. The originally thought to be impossible sub-2-minute barrier. This would be tough, but players would push this game to its limit just to get to that minute barrier. And someone was on that mission, NIS. On the 23rd, he'd get on his own run. NIS would try to go for the crouch hit, but he got the slope bug, a bug where jumping and crouching at a certain time will make the game think you're sliding on a slope in the air. He'd both got the flawless Factory and Sewer, and after cleaning up a few mistakes TYS had to deal with, NIS got a 2:02. Sub-2 was closer than ever, and 3 more seconds had to be shaved off. But, let me show you something. Sub-1 might be possible, but it would probably require a new big trick, and relentlessly difficult platforming. That's a quote from the original Mike Maker I made all the way back in the 17th. I nearly guessed Sub-2 would be impossible. That's when Induville kicks in. Congrats to Induville for being the first person in Mike Maker history to get a Sub-2. It was near perfect, still some room to improve, but this run was just unbelievable. It got everything you would want in a Mike Maker speedrun, so, nobody really responded. Other runners were happy that the Sub-2 barrier had finally been broken. It was the best day in Mike Maker history. This record was monumental, so as a result, nobody, including Induville himself, tried to beat the record for the rest of the month. It was only until the 2nd of April when Induville would finally come back, and follow up with a 1:58. This run would include tiny time saves, a Goomba jump here, and a great crouch hit. Once again, it was a perfect Fields with one hit. When we think about it, Sewers and Factory aren't much to talk about. They've been so well performed in every single run to the extent where talking about them doesn't matter unless if it's for dramatic/cinematic use. And finally, Remake was amazing, with only just one mistake. As a result, Induville barely squeezed out a 1:58, a new record nearly by a second. Induville's 2 records blew everyone's runs out of the water. Everyone was getting 2 minutes, between 2:10s and 2:30s, and then there's Induville, completely ahead of everyone else. Could someone stop Induville's reign? Or would nobody respond and it would stay there for a long time? But then, one person was determined on this record. And it just so happened to be the legend of Mike Games. He holds the record in every single featured category in all of the Mike Games. He is the one and only, E1_0. E1_0 was a new Super Mike speedrun enthusiast who started his journey in Mike World 2, but would heavily expand on it in Mike Maker AOL. Obviously, his first run ever performed in any game wasn't the best, but in Mike Maker, he was studying all of the strategies in the book, and grinded hard for a Sub-2. This was totally unexpected. For one, nobody was trying to even get a Sub-2, and second, this was an interesting goal from a new runner. Still, he decided to pursue his dreams. And so, on the 13th, E1_0 would get on his first Mike Maker run. His run actually would be performed very well. He'd get the crouch kill, and a safer version of the Goomba jump, a precise jump in the path to not get hit by a Goomba. His sewers was also surprisingly great too, despite getting hit a few times. This same exact thing would happen in Factory, but this time he didn't get hit accidentally once. This was a promising run for Sub 2. However, he didn't do the Goomba skip in Remake and bumped into a platform. It resulted in a 2 flat, and his first personal best in the game. He already in just the span of one run, was 3 seconds away from getting the world record. But still, he lost the possibility of getting Sub 2. Oh well, tough luck he thought. But, he would literally just a day later, get Sub 2. 159.733. This run would go for the crouch kill in Fields, and got a similar effect with a precise avoid. He once again went for the safe Goomba jump, which is by slowing down precisely. In Sewers, he was able to save a second off of his personal best by avoiding getting hit, already a pace for Sub 2. He would maintain the steady pace into Factory, gaining half a second in the process. In Remake though, he sadly jumped on the wrong Goomba on the final platform for the trampoline skips, forcing E1_0 to use the trampoline. Once again, he skipped the Goomba skip, but still barely edged out a Sub 2 with a 159.733. There were obviously improvements to make. For one, he had to implement the Goomba skip and fix his mistakes in Remake, and the latter is that his switching to the next tab had to be a bit faster. It was at least half a second before he switched to a tab each time he finished a stage. But overall though, this was a very notable personal best by E1_0, and would take a small break. E1_0 this time was now just 2 seconds away from getting that sweet world record. The 28th came, and E1_0 would get on more world record attempts. Unlike his other runs, he didn't go for the crouch kill in Fields, but went for the Goomba jump, no safe version. He also started used Turbo Warp, evidenced by the black background instead of white in Scratch. His sewers was well done, even getting slightly boosted forward from getting damaged by a saw. Same thing was with Factory, just with a slight mistake at the end, but didn't cost E1_0 much. And everything was going great in Remake, getting the trampoline skips. But then, he slowed down a bit to bounce on the trampoline. Thanks to that alone, he unfortunately got a 158.967, barely missing the record by a tenth of a second. Well, that was not good. He just needed a few more tenths to call the world record his. It was unfortunate he had to go through with the slowdown in Remake. But maybe later on he could get the record? Finally, a new record, by someone other than Induville. After 26 days, nearly a month of no activity, Induville no longer had the Super Mike Maker AOL world record. E1_0 had accomplished his goal. He had finally gotten the world record for Super Mike Maker. It was indeed a sizable achievement for E1_0, and he was happy. After this one run though, silence. For the next 8 months, absolutely nothing happened in AOL, nobody was talking about it, and nobody was playing it. Thankfully, Mike Maker was still active thanks to the efforts of Ben_Excel and his achievements in the ILs of the game. E1_0 didn't use live split to use RTA. So, he used a frame timer. His final result? A 156.733, is where the current Super Mic Maker record stands today. So much was achieved during this fun time, from NIS and Greedy being the main pioneers of the game, Induville kicking in and setting a sub-2, and E1_0's own journey of trying to beat the legendary 158. I can't believe people made it this far in quick succession, with 13 people having their own personal best in AOL alone, which is just something amazing to see. TYS, TNI, NIS, Greedy, E1_0, Induville are some of the players most Mic Maker speedrunner can name. They're just that notable. There are still other categories that haven't been filled with a large history just yet, but one day in the future we'll see Mic Maker thriving better than ever. But still, E1_0's record will one day fall too. This has been the history of Super Mic Maker World Records. Thanks for watching. This was quite the project to make. I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and you should check out my socials, and the runners mentioned in this video. Thanks.